The vehicle was a Becky, a small truck with a 3 liter engine, 4-inch wheels with heavy duty 10-ply tires, and a sturdy standard chassis on which buyer fits fiberglass canopy with windows, air vents, foam padded benches running along either side behind the cab. It makes a cheap car caravan for white families, generally Afrikaners, and their half-brother coloreds who can't afford both. For more affluent white South Africans, it is a second sporting vehicle for purposes to which a town car is not suited. It was yellow. Ben Smiles treated himself to it on his 40th birthday to use as a shooting break. He went trap shooting to keep his eye on out of season. And when winter came, he spent his weekends in the bush within radius of 200 kilometers of his offices and home in the city, shooting guinea fowl, red-legged partridge, wild duck and spurwing geese. Before the children were born, he had taken his wife on hunting trips further afield to Botswana, and once before the Portuguese regime was overthrown, to Mozambique. He would no sooner shoot a buck than a man, and he did not keep any revolver under his pillow to defend his wife, his children, or his property in their suburban house. The vehicle was bought for pleasure, as some women are said to be made for pleasure. His wife pulled the face of tasting something that her teeth on edge when he brought it home. But he defended the dyed blonde jauntiness, yellow and cheerful, is repelled heat. They stood round it indulgently, wife and family. The children are excited, as it seemed nothing else could excite them, by a new possession. Nothing made them so happy as buying things. They had no interest in feeding rabbits. She had smiled at him the way she did when he spurted ahead of her and did what he wanted. A glimpse self of the self that does not survive coupling. Anything will spot you a mile off in the bush. In various and different circumstances, certain objects and individuals are going to turn out to be vital. The wager of survival cannot, by its nature, reveal which in advance of events. How was one to know? Civil emergency planning services will not provide. In 70s, after Soweto riots, paramecial firms brought out government-approved line first aid boxes. The circumstances are incalculable in the manner in which they come about, even even if apocalyptically or politically foreseen. The identity of vital individuals and objects hidden by their humble or frivolous role in an habitual set of circumstances. It began prosaically weirdly. The strikes of 1980 had dragged on, one inspired or brought about by solidarity with another, until the walkout and the shutdown were lived with as contagious and contiguous and continuous phenomena rather than industrial chaos. While the government continued to compose concessions to the black trade unions explicitly worded to conceal exactly concomitant concomitant restrictions. The black workers concerned went hungry, angry, and workless anyway, and the shop floor was all that was left of burned out factories. For a long time, no one had really known what was happening outside the area, which his own eyes were witnessed riots, arson, occupation of the headquarters, international corporations, bombs in public buildings, the censorship of newspapers, Radio and television left rumor and word of mouth as the only sources of information about this chronic state of uprising all over the country. At home, after weeks of writing out, citing Soweto, a march of Johannesburg of variously estimated 15,000 blacks had been stopped at the edge of the business center at the cost of a variously estimated number of lives, black and white. The bank accountant for whom Bem had designed a house stripped of that if the situation in the city showed no signs of being contained, his praise, the bank would have to declare a moratorium. So Bam, in a state of detached disbelief at his action, taking long molded plastic foam box that one had once held a Japanese hi-fi system, withdraw 5,000 rands in notes, and Maureen gave a request 24 hours for, with, for withdrawal from her savings account had clear 1,756 rands in notes which secured by rubber bands she carried home without incident of a woven grass shopping bag with Bam's suit from dry cleaner folded ostensibly on top. And then the bank did not close. Blacks were held back. They were temporarily short of ammunition, and they had long since given up heroism of meeting bullets with sticks and stones by the citizen force, strengthened by white Rhodesian immigrants, some former zealous scouts accustomed to this sort of fighting, and the arrival of a plain blood of white mercenaries flown from Bangu, Zaire, Uganda, whenever it was they had been propping up the current enemies, Bokasa's and Mobutus. The children stayed home from school but played widely at street fighting in the peaceful garden. The liquor store suddenly delivered wine and beer ordered weeks before. Two black men, overalls embroidered with legend of brand of cane spirit, carrying a cases into the kitchen and exchanging time of day jokingly with the servant. For the 20th, the 100 times since the past burning of the 50s, since Sharpeville, since Soweto, to since Elsie's River 1980, it seemed that all quietening down again. First males had given the time to left as 10 years, then another 5 years. Then, as perhaps projected, shifted away into children's time. They yearned for three to be no time left at all. Where three there was, where while there still was. They sickened at the appalling thought that they might find they had lived out their whole lives as they were born white pariah dogs in black continent. They joined political parties and contact groups in willingness to show privilege. It was supposed to be their white dog nature to guard mirages and tanks. They were not believed they had thought of leaving. Then while they were young enough to cast off of the blacks' rejection as well as white privilege to make life in other country, they had stayed and told each other everyone else that this and nowhere else was home. While knowing as time left went by, the reason had be- become they couldn't get their money but Bem's growing saving and investments, Maureen's little legacy of Libia's Shia's maternal grandfather had left her. The house there was less and less opportunity of selling as city riots became part of life. Once again, for 101st time, thousands of blacks were imprisoned. Broken glass was swept up. Cut telephone lines were reconnected. Radio and television assured that control was re-established. The husband and wife felt it was idiotic to have that money hidden in the house. They were about to put it back in the bank again. When it all happened, there were transformation of myth or religious parable. The bank accountant had been legendary warning about hornbill of African porktails. His fleeting tries ignored the peril. The yellow backy that was bought for fun turned out to be the vehicle that which bore them away from the gun shopping malls and the blazing unsold houses depressed market from the suburbs mains washing round bodies then bodies in their Saturday morning garb of safari suits and the heat guided muscle missiles that struck Boeings carrying those trying to take off from the Jan Smuts airport. The cook nanny Nora ran away. The decently paid contented male servant, living in their yard since they had married, clothed by them in two sets of uniforms, khaki pants for rough housework, white drill for wanting at tables, given Wednesdays and alternate Fridays, Sundays free, allowed to have his friends visit him, and his town woman sleep with him in his room. He turned out to be the chosen one in whose hands their lives were to be held. Frog Prince Xavier July. Frog Prince Xavier July. He brought sink baths big enough for the children to sit in, one by one. On his hand, paraffin of water heated on one cooking fires. She washed the children, then herself in their dirty water. For the first time, she in her life she had found that she smelled bad between her legs, and sending the children out, dropping the sack over the doorway, disgustedly scrubbed at the smooth lining of her vagina and the unseen knot of her anus, scum and suds. Her husband took a chance and washed in the river. The all these is flowing rivers carried the risk of bilharzia infection. July came back and forth with forage boiled wild spinach, and even a pawpaw, hard and green. The family's custom of finishing meal with fruit ritualistically over observed somehow by one so long habituated to them. No uniform here. He wore an illegibly faded T-shirt and dusty trousers, clothes he left to come back to on his 2 yearly leave. But he went in and out hot with bearing he had had for 15 years in their home of service, not servile, understanding their needs and liking, allying himself discreetly with their standards, and even when disciplining and indulgence of children. We'll cook for ourselves, July. We must make our own fire. The guest protesting had given trouble. He and she caught the echo of those visitors who came to stay in her house and tipped him when they left. He had brought wood for Bam, but was back again at dusk. He didn't trust them to look after themselves. You want I make a small fire now. He was carrying a golden syrup tin full of milk. There was a little boy with him. Earlier in the day, he had chased curious black children away. This is my third born, nearly same time like Victor. He's 21. Victor is 21 January, isn't it? This one is this one is Christmas Day. The white children had seen the servant's photograph of his children in his wallet along with his passbook. Back there, they looked at the black child as it is an as at an imposter. Is from the goat this milk we drink. I don't know if Gina she is going to like it. Always Gina a little bit fussy. Madam, you can boil it. He screwed up one eye and his mouth drew on the slide of his mustache. Advising caution, most delicately acknowledging some lack of hygiene. If he were to compare the goat syrup with the sterilized bottle which he would take milk out of the refrigerator back there. The vehicle was moved from the bush at night to a group of abandoned huts with the sigit of but removed from those of July's family. Pam did not use headlights, was guided by July moving along in the dark ahead of him, as he had been for certain stretches of the journey. That was, they had avoided both patrols and roving bands. July knowledge of instances that in the country tops, black patrol attendants often live in sheds behind the garage and general store complex on that they had kept going on and on, although they had left with only enough fuel to take them less than half away. He asked for notes from the plastic phone box every time, came back with petrol water food. It was a miracle. It was a it was all a miracle, and one ought to have known from the sufferings of saints that miracles are horror. How that load of human beings in the haphazard few possessions, there was time to take long the bag of orange. Maureen had run back to fetch from the kitchen. The radio bam remembered so they could hear what was happening behind as they fled. Could hope to arrive at the destination placed before them. That was the impossibility from minute to minute. We can go to my home, July said it, standing in the living room where he had never sat down, as he would say. We can buy little but a bit paraffin when there was a stain to be removed from the floor. That he should have been the one to decide what they should do, that their helplessness in their own house should have made it clear to him that he must do this. The sheer unlikeliness was the logic of their position. There was nothing else to do but the impossible. Now they had stayed too long. They put children into vehicle, covered them with tarpaulin, with under which Maureen crawled, and lo, how the vehicle hadn't broken down, urged across the wheeled and mealy fields, groundnut fields into dongas, and through sluices whose stones were deep under the table of summer rains. How they had found their way, not daring to use their roads, taking 3 days and nights for a journey that could be done in a day's hard driving under normal conditions. But that was July. July knew the whole 600 kilometers, had walked it, making a fire to keep the lions away at night, where his path bordered and even passed through the Kruger Park the first time he came to the city to look for work. The vehicle was driven night within the encirclement of a roofless hut, red as an anthill, where thick clay walls had washed down to rejoin the earth here and there, and scrubby trees pushed through them like limbs of lumbering exposed half demolished building. The vehicle flattened, tall weeds of flow and a roof of foliage, thorn and parasitic creepers hid the yellow paint. From the doorway of the hut had been given she could make out the vehicle, or thought she could. Knew it was there. There was still a plastic demijohn of tap water, taken from the last drop, hidden in it. She went secretly, observed afar by whispering black children, to so fetch rations for her children to drink, within the hot metal bound hollowly where her weight buckled it. The vehicle was deserted. The house entered. Trapped flies lay droning into unconsciousness on their backs. It was as if she had walked into other abandoned house. You won't see it from the air. They had watched two planes flying over, although at a great height. Bam was satisfied the vehicle would not draw a stray bomb sat by aircraft from the Black Army's bases on Mozambique that might not reconnoiter reconnoiter the bush and find a suspicious sign of white paramilitary presence and in an area where even a broken down car was a rarity. July's home was not a village but a habitation of mud houses occupied only by members of his extended family. There was a risk that if he, as he seemed to assume, he could reconcile them to say the strange presence of whites in their midst, keep their keep their mouths shut. He could prevent the other people living scattered around about, who knew the look of every thorn bush, from discovering there were thorn bushes and overgrown white man's car, and passing on the information to any Black Army patrol, if not acting upon themselves. July broke into snickering embarrassment at her ignorance of a kind of authority not understood his. Anyway, he had told them everybody about the vehicle. Told them what? She was confident of his really good sense. He had worked for her for years. Often Bam couldn't follow his broken English, but he and she understood each other well. I tell them you gave it to me. Bam blew laughter. Who'll believe that? They know what it is happening. The trouble in town. The white people are chased away from their houses and we talk over. Everybody is like this, isn't it? But you can't drive. She was anxious for their safety. He should be believed. How they know I am not driving? Everybody know I am living 15 years in town. I am knowing plenty things. It was some days before the vehicle ceased to be the point of reference for their existence. What was left of the tinned food was still there. The box of containing Victor's electric racing car track that it was discovered he must have put it under cover of adult confusion. There was nowhere in this house hard to put anything. It's not worthwhile dragging everything out. But Victor nagged for his racing car track. It only means you will have to dismantle it and pack it up again. He had the habit of standing in front of her with his demands. She walked around him. He planted himself again. Where are we going? Vic, where's there to set it up? And there is no electricity. You can't run it. I want to show it. To who? The black children who watched hurt from afar and scuttled as her glance was thrown among them reformed a little way off. But tell them they mustn't touch it. I don't want my things messed up and broken. You must tell them. She laughed as adults did. In the power they refused to use. I tell them? They don't understand our language. The boy said nothing but kicked steadily at the dented rusted bath used for their ablutions. Don't do you hear me? That's Joyce. The demijohn of water was empty. Royce, the littles, kept asking for Coca-Cola. They then buy some, go to the shop and buy some. She put paraffin tins of river water on the fire. She would cool the boiled water overnight. It's madness to let them think that stuff straight from the water they'll get ill. Bam got the blaze going. I assure you, they've been drinking water wherever they find it. Already, it's impossible to stop them. What are we going to do if they get ill? But he didn't answer, and she didn't expect him to. They are lay between them, and all such questions unanswerable. They were lucky to be alive. The seats from the vehicle no longer belonged to it. They had to become the furniture of the hut. Outside, in an afternoon cooled by a rippled covering of grey luminous clouds, she sat on the grounds as others did. Over the valley beyond the kraal of euphoria and dead throne where the gods were kept, she knew the vehicle was there. A ship that had docked in a far country. Anchored in the khaki wheat, it would rust and be stripped to hulk unless it made the journey back soon.